Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, the second and last part of my conversation with Dan Bliss. Dan Bliss, not, in my opinion, an accidental success, not lucky, hardworking and sharp and trying to please the customer. The customer comes first. That's a good strategy. Thank you. Sponsors, Upper Deck, Topps, Panini, Heritage Auctions, Huggins and Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So here it is. And thanks, Dan. Thanks, listeners.
If someone wants to be a modern collector, you have to at least understand that anything you decide to hold on to needs to be one of those players we're going to remember on a household name basis 20, 30 years from now, if you want to hold value. Now, if you're just collecting it because you love it or it's your favorite player, and there's a lot of that. There's people that collect players and they don't care if that person's ever a Hall of Famer. They just love that player. Maybe they met him in person. Maybe they were a fan of that player when they played in college, or maybe they're from their hometown, or whatever it is. If you're a true fan of that player, you don't care what it's worth. And that's great. That's a big part of the hobby, and that's wonderful. But if you're a value type minded person or you're an investment minded person, I think the key is to remember the years from now, if the player doesn't become a household name. Like in NFL, there's so many quarterbacks worth so much money, and we're only going to have a few quarterbacks from this era that are remembered 20, 30 years from now. Like my mom won't know their name. That's one of my rules of thumb on Hall of Famers. If my mom doesn't know their name, then
you're perfectly logical. People are not always interested in logic.
That's true.
Jeremy Lee, I think you've been on his show.
Yeah, Jeremy's great.
He's great. His latest thing is this spectrum that from 1 to 100 of what kind of collector are you? So you are speaking just like I could speak to the ones that resonate most with me. But there are many different reasons why people collect or hold on to things or buy this but not that. I actually believe some of them are wrong in terms of bad strategies. If your objective is to make money, then there's some ways that, again, but there is a chance. So there's no absolute sure things. But that's the nuance of it. That's my point with you, is that if the shows you're setting up and encouraging to have these kinds of dealers there with a good balance, that is making sure that everybody can have a good experience at your show, not just the ones who are logical or only want this thing. They can see it all. And then it's a little bit of a survival of the fittest today, as well as moving forward. Because some of these things are, like I said, they're bad strategies to buy all the rookies of 1 year and hold them for 20 years. That's normally a bad strategy, but the year 2000 in football, that would have been a fabulous strategy because you would have held on to a 6-round quarterback that would have paid many other years of messing up.
That's true.
03-04 basketball.
That's right.
Hold on to these. So again, there are exceptions and people delight in those. And my thing is, I just want people to study up on it, not just blindly being lucky, but saying, you know what? I think this Cooper Flagg is a generational talent, or LeBron James was a generational talent. I'm going to go hard into that. And that's a choice you're making.
Yeah. People are saying that about Wemby, of course.
Wemby as well, but his biggest enemies are his two knees, that he's got an awful lot going on. Any lower body knocking around, they're going to be tough on him.
You know what, though? There are some big players who've had long, long careers. You can look at Kareem, even skinny guys. Kareem and Durant are good examples of people who played long time.
They weren't bangers, but if Wemby gets banged on, if he stands out and wants to hit 3-pointers, which I think he can do.
Yeah.
Shaq was leaning in. Shaq was a banger, and he was given more than he got. But you put Shaq against Kareem, Kareem was doing fadeaway skyhooks.
Yep.
He was going away from the contact.
Anyway. It remains to be seen what kind of player Wemby's going to be long-term, and he might have to adjust.
Exactly.
But he's doing 3 points. That's good.
His biggest problem could just be injuries. And so, again, immense talent, but injuries could get in the way. That's the dynamic element of the hobby, is that if his career is cut short, then he was a guy of amazing promise.
Well, you remember Greg Oden? He was a big guy who had foot problems, right?
Yeah.
He was a top pick and ended up having a super short career. And that happens. It's the nature of sport. It happens in most sports.
Okay.
What do you collect now?
You're looking at it.
Yeah.
Collect cards to put on my wall.
Okay. What's the criteria? Seeing big
Just
cards, little cards?
anything I like. I really am trying to be eclectic. I have a lot of vintage stuff from when I was a kid and when I was a young adult. I have a lot of type cards from when I was doing the magazines and books and running the company. Really did not buy cards or collections as much as some type cards to show in the various books and magazines. So I wasn't buying sets, I wasn't buying even accumulations. But now that I'm pretty retired, I do dollar box stuff and occasionally pick up stuff, buy some unopened stuff every once in a while just for the fun of that. And if it's an interesting something, I'll get it slabbed and put it up on my wall. So when people come into my card cave, they can give a little tour and it never fails. There's nobody that has seen every card on the card wall because some of them are extremely rare and some of them are very common. So it's alphabetically organized. So you can go straight to whatever letter you want to look at. So what you're looking at behind me now are O's and P's and R's and S's. And then I have other panels. It's through Z.
Oh, I like that.
Generally, people can see things they can recognize by sight if they're an advanced collector or if they're a serious collector.
Well, I see Page, I see Rose, I see Perez. Those are some.
You're a vintage guy. You're known by who you recognize because I mentioned I had Nat Turner over here last week and he geeked out on the modern cards. He loved the vintage too, but he immediately was drawn to the jambalayas, the other kinds of things that were from the late 90s, the PMGs that he could see just out of the corner of his eye. He's, oh, okay, what about that?
Yeah.
But I'm trying to have something for everybody. And so that's why I can continue my quest. I'll never be done, but I am trying to have less cards every year because I'm trying to find a new home, Dan. Not willing to set up at a card show, but I sell some lots on eBay and I sell a little bit on ComC and I try to reduce.
If you're ever compelled to be a vendor at a show,
Could I be the masked vendor, like the masked singer?
Ooh, I like that.
I don't.
I like that.
Joke. That was a joke. But how far east do you get?
Starting in March, we're going to be in Atlanta.
Well, that's pretty far east.
And then in November of next year, we're going to be going to Orlando, Florida. So we're going to have a Southeast hub.
To what extent are your dealers going to come with you? Are you going to have a new base of dealers?
That's a great question.
I'm really interested in that.
We don't know yet, but I know for a fact we have a lot of them that are really excited to come from all the way from the West Coast to the East Coast. So I think that's good for East Coast collectors. They're going to see a lot of vendors they've never seen before. So I think that'll be a nice thing to offer to the East Coast vendors is a new mix of options at each show. I know already there's a couple of our big vendors who drive all up and down the West Coast. We do shows from San Diego, LA, Phoenix, Vegas, Portland, Seattle, and we're going to be adding Salt Lake City in July. So we're all up and down the West Coast. And we get vendors that drive all the way down to San Diego. They'll drive all the way up to Seattle. And they're already planning their March trip to Atlanta to drive across the country. In fact, there's a couple of them that are going to pool together and rent a truck to drive all their stuff together.
You realize there's an opportunity there.
What, to get a trucking business?
Oh, that too. I'm just saying, if the show circuit were organized so that Atlanta is 1 week and Jacksonville, Florida is the next week and Orlando is the next week. And then before Atlanta, maybe you've got Nashville, although Nashville's kind of taken. But these guys that are working the van, they're not bringing an 18-wheeler in most cases. They're bringing a van or a medium-sized truck. And point to point is drive to Atlanta and drive back.
You're touching on something. We actually had that experience in July. We did a show in Seattle and Portland back to back, 2 weeks. And there were a lot of vendors from the South that drove up or flew up and just spent 10 days in that city and just stuck around several days in between and made a trip of it.
Because that make it worth it. Yeah.
It's also more fun. And we're doing that in November of 2026 in the Southeast. We're going to have an Atlanta and an Orlando show back to back. So
I love it. Again, I think that's thinking smart because on the other hand, it can be hard on families, but a lot of the dealers back in the day, and even now, I think there's a fair number of them that are family oriented.
Look, you talk about family oriented. If you want to bring your family and spend a couple days in Disney, there's your opportunity to do something with your family and just do the shows on the weekends.
In your business, are you doing things with AI you weren't doing a year ago? Or what do you see there?
That's a good question. We're using it for some organizational things, and we're right now playing around with using AI to create some content, but not a lot yet. Frankly, we're still learning how to use the tools for enhancing things and making our job easier. But a lot of the content we create, we've got a full-time in-house graphic designer. Maybe there will be ways to automate some of the things we do. For example, for all of our vendors that have an online presence, we create a social media post for them. And we still do that manually, but we're exploring ways to create and design that using AI. So perhaps it'll make it more efficient for us.
No, I promise you it'll be more efficient for you. It just may not be accurate.
There you go.
You don't want to do damage. No, AI can be tricky, can put out some garbage or some partial garbage.
For example, we're not writing articles with it. We don't want something on our website that looks like it's just AI created. Our concern is that we come from a real authentic place, and we don't want to jeopardize our relationship with collectors by putting out stuff that comes across as inauthentic. We're treading lightly and being careful about things like that because that's important to us. Our reputation and our relationship with collectors is paramount to what we do.
People think the most important thing in using AI is asking the query accurately, articulating what you want. But actually, the most important thing in using AI is reviewing what you get when you put something out there and making sure that you're smart enough and look deep enough to see, is this reasonable? Is this true? Is this an accurate representation of what I want to put out under my name? Because otherwise, like you said, you can look bad. It can look inauthentic, especially if it's inaccurate or does not have the right tone. And so that's not just about the right prompts. It's about making sure the final edit, before you release it, that this is really something that's going to reflect credit on what I'm trying to do and not misleading or anything like that.
I'd like to hear your take on PSA's purchase of Beckett.
I don't think the monopoly FTC concerns will go anywhere. This is an opportunity to really refresh the Beckett brand, as well as be a great boon to the whole hobby. Anybody that's complaining about this acquisition, I hope, like me, they will give it a chance.
Do you think they bought it just for the strategic move of somebody else not buying it?
Or but the more he and I talked, he sees the value in all the different elements. If he strengthens the Beckett brand rather than making it worse, then these monopoly concerns will go away quickly. The statement I believe to be true is that Beckett was acquired by collectors and will be run independently and will be separate. Okay. On the other hand, it is owned by collectors. And so if collectors says, you're not going to do this anymore, then they own the company. It's a division within collectors, and it'll be run by the general manager of that division, the person that's in charge of the Beckett brand, but they'll be reporting to collectors. They need to be able to run their business.
I'm hopeful that PSA will respect Beckett's independence and allow them to grow the business as they see.
They will up to a point.
Right.
But a monopoly is squishing. I don't see that, but they're not looking to promote Beckett to be bigger or better than PSA. Looking for Beckett to thrive, though. I think what's going to shake out in the next year as you're growing your business and doing a lot of things right is that we now have more than 4 grading companies. Okay. We have more others, 4 that have been recognized above the others, but there are others that do have some critical mass. But of those 4, 3 of them are now aligned and owned by one larger entity. And so even though they're saying they're going to be run independently, there's still overall oversight by collectors. But collectors is not stupid. The new leadership of Beckett, the new leadership of SGC is not stupid. They can see opportunities. They want to do the best they can. It's just that there may be constraints that we're not aware of. But like I said, what's for the good of the hobby is for shows to be thriving, and they thrive when there's a lot of grading energy in the room. Usually that's when there's more than one submission opportunity for the competition.
Look, it's got to be about growing the hobby, and people talk about that all the time. But sometimes I feel it's lip service.
It is not lip service by collectors.
No, I know that's what I mean by collectors, but I just mean in general, like, there's a lot of, it's like almost a cliche about growing the hobby.
Collectors has the most to gain in the hobby, and don't know this for fact, but it looks like they would like to go public. Their narrative needs to be more and more inclusive. So everything you're saying, they ought to be hanging on your words to make sure that one of their companies of collectors is the grader of choice at every card show. And it might be PSA, that's their prerogative. Or it might be SGC in one part of the country, or when they're more vintage shows, or Beckett in Dallas for sure, where it's pretty easy to set up and a great clientele already. So I'm with you on that, but I'm not the boss. Actually, you are the boss of your shows. And I just want to encourage you, keep working hard to get that right configuration, which includes grading, of getting it in the room so that collectors and dealers both are going to have a really good experience.
I think we do. Full circle, it's really about taking care of collectors. That's the number one priority. That should be the number one for shows. That should be the number one for shops, even online sellers. If online sellers aren't taking care of collectors, then they're just milking the hobby. That's not the right place to come from. You have to come from a place of helping collectors, encouraging collectors, giving collectors a good experience. And that comes back full circle to you if you're taking care of collectors.
Appreciate your fervor and that you're putting your passion into action. So keep up the good work. And
thank you so much.